time.
There's something magical that happens the moment the old guard gracefully passes the baton to the new. It's precisely at this point where we can see how the soon-to-be past binds itself to the future. It's nothing less than the connection of one generation to the next, in a kind of unbroken chain that sustains life itself through each and every one of us. At once, it pays tribute to the legacy of the old, while recognizing the potential of the eager and emerging but not fully realized new. Anyone who's had a child of their own or has generously mentored someone else in some capacity has played a part in this beautiful process. Something tragically poetic happened by way of artistic failure of the Star Wars sequels. The original Star Wars films, as defined by their heights, exemplified excellence. And it's as if their would-be successors saw the spirit behind that success and said, yeah, we're gonna do something else. Well, mission accomplished. Because the sequels served as a mere pastiche of the original and failed to match its heart and substance. And that's because substance by its nature is easy to recognize, but hard to pick up, and even harder to fake. Creating something substantive does not mean throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It means paying deference to the things that always work, and getting down to the difficult task of somehow making them fresh. It's for artists who have an actual story to tell, and are willing to put in the time and work to do so.
Yeah, that shit.
As has been said here before, the Star Wars sequels are SWINO, Star Wars in name only. And the reason for that is that the sequels were more interested in doing their own thing. The problem is their own thing sucked. Today's video features 3 of what I'll call scenes of succession, all from the first 2 trilogies. These are scenes not so interested in doing their own thing, but in doing the proper thing, emotively and narratively for the universe that it belongs to. This will be a big point going forward. But before that, a very quick important summation of the problem presented toward the start of 2017's The Last Jedi. Picking up from the 2015 quasi-cliffhanger of The Force Awakens, Rey finds Luke and desperately seeks his tutelage as she extends to him his old lightsaber, which serves as a kind of figurative baton. Speaking personally, while I didn't like any of the sequels, this was a decent enough setup, and it could have worked. Except it didn't. The few isolated moments of skillful execution in the sequels have become little more than reminders of missed opportunities, and I'll leave it at that. Because it's not the job of the audience to write the stories for the filmmakers. Picking up from the J.J. Abrams story, Rian Johnson is telling the audience that he plans on doing things differently. Okay, fair enough, I guess. But it must be restated that it's not enough to be different, because there are 1,000,001 bad ways to be unique. Being good, on the other hand, means walking a very narrow path. And that path won't always look very original. And that's okay, so long as the story's good. So this moment is a declaration and a representation of this film's separation, not just from the previous film, but from the approach and philosophies of the legacy films. Was this Disney's right as the IP owner to do so? Legally, yeah. But was it right to do so, artistically and creatively speaking? In my opinion, no. Despite what this may sound like, what was called for wasn't fan service, but service to the spirit of the source material, the rich story that Disney inherited via brute force. Unfortunately, they decided to do their own thing, which was the opposite of service, and which is a big problem for everything when service is what's actually needed. Here's an excellent scene from a totally different film that explains the problem with this kind of attitude and approach to things. It speaks for itself and deserves and will receive a video of its own, if just for its profound moral and spiritual implication. While this scene relates to today's theme, this is clearly about much more than a sci-fi fantasy film franchise. Anyway, here's that.
We lose our identities here in Wichita, and we become the hands of the company. What you did, the reason you were insincere, is that you cut off that bond. It would be like the hand just sort of breaking away from the arm and saying, oh, you know what, I have this other thing out here to do that has nothing to do with you.
With that, let's move on to the scenes in question. The 3 scenes of succession in Star Wars, in order of story, followed by one sequel scene of suck, session, or session of suck, if you prefer.
Give me the Star Wars, don't let them end.
You've been a good apprentice, Obi-Wan. I foresee you will become a great Jedi Knight.
A lot of folks have understandable gripes with the prequels. Still, they positively shine in comparison to the sequels. And the prequels at least honor the legacy of the original trilogy by earning some special moments of conflict where the student surpasses the teacher, or it becomes the student's duty to do so out of necessity. Typically, it happens at a point where the energy and endurance of youth becomes mandatory for victory. The Phantom Menace treats the audience to what's widely considered the finest lightsaber battle in the series, but it's also followed by one of the series' most emotionally resonant scenes, and it's well delivered by the capable hands of Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor, a pairing that was so good, it leaves us wishing we could have seen more of them together.
You've been a good apprentice, Obi-Wan. And you're a much wiser man than I am. I foresee you will become a great Jedi Knight.
About 10 minutes after this exchange, we're treated to the best part of Episode 1, and one of the best parts of the entire series. It's a nice payoff and is so crucial to the series, we could almost forgive the film's shortcomings, if just for this. I did. It's unlikely that we'll ever get another villain as iconic as Vader, but the Phantom Menace introduces us to a legitimately intimidating substitute in Darth Maul. In terms of evil, he does look the part, and when Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan approach him, you sense the weight of the encounter, just like you did in Episodes 4, 5, and 6. The traits of the characters we're given here are noteworthy. Qui-Gon Jinn, we assume, is older and likely more experienced than Maul. But Maul is dangerous and moves faster, and the fact that he's using a saber staff means he's prepared to fight 2 opponents at once, and that he has enough aggressive vitality to do so. Obi-Wan is a kind of wingman here, and a perfect one. And even with his youthful edge, he knows better than to try to overtake the lead from his more experienced teacher. And together they slowly gain ground on Maul, until Maul finds an opening to kick Kenobi out of the way. It's at this point, despite Qui-Gon's persistent approach on Maul, that we really start to sense danger. And here's another masterful rhyme with A New Hope. Here we're watching Obi-Wan, watching Qui-Gon, just like we are. He's stuck behind a force field, and we're stuck in our seats. And we're feeling the dread of a situation beyond control. We sense something bad coming. And it does, in the form of a well-choreographed, well-paced duel, and its brutal ending, along with the rush of the emotion that this scene earns. Of all the deaths in the Star Wars movies, this one, I think, is the most violent. You really feel this one, and it makes you want to do about 1,000 stomach crunches, if just to make up for it. But more than that, Qui-Gon's death makes us want some action, and frankly, revenge. And Kenobi, who is usually well-tempered and patient, gives into his rage and adrenaline as he attacks. And our sense of outrage wants him to f*** things up. I love this little moment here, before the force field opens, the way Kenobi bounces in place like a boxer in his corner. He's hyping himself up and he's psyching himself up for the fight. It's the only lightsaber battle in Star Wars that feels like a kickoff to a street fight. It's kind of badass, and this scene was helped by how comparatively slower the lightsaber battles before this one were. Kenobi takes it to Maul, and quickly manages to split his saber staff in half. But Maul moves fast and once again finds another opening and forces Kenobi over the edge. This sets up the kind of situation we'd see Kenobi thrive in, unconventional ones where wits are needed, as well as an appreciation of high ground over low. Here, Kenobi suffers the low ground, a scenario that gets reversed in Revenge of the Sith. Following Maul's defeat, we get a final reunion of the student and teacher. Qui-Gon is held out just long enough to watch his Padawan succeed him. And this, along with all of its implications, is the real narrative beginning of all of the rich drama that is the rest of Star Wars, 1 through 6.
Promise me you will train the boy.
Yes, Master.
He is the chosen one. He will bring balance.
I have taught you everything I know, and you have become a far greater Jedi than I could ever hope to be. But be patient, Anakin.
Following Attack of the Clones, the Revenge of the Sith opens with Anakin having gradually surpassed Obi-Wan in terms of force use in combat. This is demonstrated in the early minutes of the film, as Anakin rather quickly dispatches his Sith rival Dooku, who had rather easily sidelined Kenobi. On the surface, this seems proof that Anakin has surpassed his mentor. But beyond brute force, there are other factors that make a great Jedi, or person, and two of those are temperance and wisdom, both of which Anakin lacks relative to his master. Anakin remains divided between the two philosophies symbolized quite creatively in this shot. On one hand, the right hand, is the blue Jedi path of passive acceptance and service. On the other, the adversarial left-hand Sith path of the ends justifying the means. By the way, a pithy moral and factual distillation for any apologists justifying careless, power-hungry thinking. If you have little reservation about ends justifying means, understand that means are ends in themselves. Think about that, then search your feelings. You'll know it to be true. Do you think it was an accident that Anakin's left hand holds the red saber and his right hand holds the blue? Isn't it more reasonable that this duel was choreographed to end with this exact shot? The Jedi Council and Palpatine know that Anakin is the most formidable upcoming instrument of the Force. And of course, that is the heart of the conflict of Episode 3. And it leaves us with a kind of bidding war over the control of Anakin Skywalker, a war which Sidious wins before he loses. But before any of that, note how here, Anakin accepts Palpatine's direct order as if he's already his apprentice. Pretty revealing.
Good, Anakin, good. Kill him.
I shouldn't.
Do it.
In Revenge of the Sith, particularly in the duel with Dooku, Anakin surpasses Obi-Wan in a clear yet narrow sort of way. At this point in the story, if Anakin can simply manage to suppress his ambition, things might work out for him. But it requires that he matures and yields just a bit in order for that to happen. And of course, it won't happen because Anakin is a tragic figure who's consigned to the fate of his fears. Still, for a moment, he lives very close to the possibility of becoming a force for good, which is what makes this scene so devastating. And it's why this scene in Revenge of the Sith is my favorite. It's one of those scenes that makes you say, damn, so close.
I haven't been very appreciative of your training. I've been arrogant, and I apologize. I've just been so frustrated with the Council.
Note the surprised, pleased expression on Kenobi's face. He may be humble, but he's not so old as to have forgotten what it's like to be young and want to move up in the world.
You are strong and wise, Anakin, and I am very proud of you. I have taught you everything I know, and you have become a far greater Jedi than I could ever hope to be.
Sound familiar? Again, just go back 2 films. Kenobi has become the wise teacher with his own headstrong pupil. And he encourages Anakin the same way Qui-Gon encouraged him. You can subvert stuff like this all you want, but if you do, you have to offer something better. And if you can't, perhaps being original and subverting shit is not your forte.
Oh, shit.
But be patient, Anakin. It will not be long before the Council makes you a Jedi Master.
And with that, Obi-Wan and Anakin separate, and really for the last time. The next time they'll meet, not as friend to friend or even Jedi to Jedi, but Sith to Jedi, acid to base.
Obi-Wan, may the Force be with you.
Goodbye, old friend. May the Force be with you.
I've been waiting for you, Obi-Wan. We meet again at last. The circle is now complete. When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
Only a master of evil, Darth.
Only a master of evil. Clever dialogue here, though. The way Kenobi calls him Darth and not Anakin. This is technically more of a surpassing than a succession, according to my rules here. Because Vader is not Kenobi's student, and he has not succeeded Kenobi as far as we can see in mastering some of the more subtle aspects of the Force. At this point, he's still bitter and very much in pursuit of pointless control because he has nothing else left to live for. He's now little more than an advanced but confined student of the dark side, which is why this line is so great. Obi-Wan simply disses and dismisses the Sith philosophy, which is quite in line with his character. He's basically saying, sure, your team can break things, so what?
The entire house is dark-sided.
Beyond control, does evil destruction for the sake of control justify itself? Destruction by its nature is, generally speaking, considerably easier than construction, because it doesn't require any care for the thing being broken. But it does take nerve, cold, careless nerve. And could this be the reason evil groups require their initiates do evil things before they're allowed to join its ranks? Of course. And a Han from another universe breaks it down plainly.
You mean you want me to put my head on that thing? An act of faith. I'm a man of little faith, Mr. Han. Very few people can be totally ruthless. It isn't easy. It takes more strength than you might believe.
So while Vader can surpass his former teacher in raw one-to-one combat, because of his divergent path, he can't technically succeed him. Not as a Jedi, anyway. That'll be Luke Skywalker's job. A job Luke's not ready for. And that's where the drama lives. In the previous 2 scenes, the student was on the cusp or had surpassed his master. That's not the case here. Luke's a neophyte. But the beauty in this scene, since we were just on the subject of initiation into carelessness, is that this is a scene of Luke's initiation, but into responsibility. And that's what makes this my favorite scene from Star Wars 77. It's brilliant in its execution and impressive in the number of things it accomplishes. Kenobi, like Qui-Gon before him, is prepared to surrender his life for his beliefs. And he uses Vader's now predictable oppositional nature to do so. More than that, though, he's setting a stage for Luke to succeed him. But for this to happen, Luke needs to realize the gravity of the path he's on now, and that he'll have to walk that path himself. Because Kenobi can't defeat Vader here, and because of the particular stakes of the moment, by removing himself from the equation, Kenobi throws Luke into the deep end. While there are better ways to get your kid to swim, in this case, the galaxy's on the line. So let's give old Ben a pass on this one.
Ben?
I like how the music swells up here, and the sounds of the blasters fade in. The quick return to sound and action supports and highlights the chaos, and the idea that during a crisis, there's no time to mourn. And in this case, little need to, because within seconds, we and Luke hear Kenobi's call from beyond.
Run, Luke, run!
And because of the mystical nature of this story, everyone immediately understands what just happened, and there's no disbelief to suspend. Additionally, by communing with Luke this way, Obi-Wan gives Luke the gift of the proof of life beyond death. In doing, he passes on to him a philosophical perspective and a crucial safeguard that Anakin lacked or was unable to accept: that life passes through death, and that we must accept letting go of it. Luke gets a second dose of this lesson in Return of the Jedi in the deathbed scene with Master Yoda. All of this is important for Luke to be able to proceed courageously and helps him resist the inevitable temptations that his father gave into. There's a Channel 11 video on that. So Luke gets proper motivation to take the hero's journey, and the audience would remain similarly invested for 2 more films. The goodwill that Star Wars once had probably crystallized right here in this scene for a lot of people. Approximately 1 hour and 32 minutes into what was then simply Star Wars.
You start a conversation, you can't even finish it. You're talking a lot, but you're not saying anything.
I will never train another generation of Jedi. I came to this island to die.
Yeah, so did this film, Mr. Hamill. The sequels don't really give us any believable moment of succession between student and teacher, or earn the progression of the story or its blank slate of a main character. Now, again, it didn't have to do what Lucas did, but if you're gonna do your own thing, it ought to be a good thing, right? The problem with the Disney sequels is that where they try to imitate the originals, they fail. But where they try to be original, they also fail. They pick the wrong elements to recycle, and the new elements are just bad ideas. Stuff just kind of happens in the sequels because the films insist that they do. But they fail to convince us of what they show us, and that we should care, regardless of how poorly they were considered or sequenced. Oh, I'm a Jedi. Oh, Snoke's all-powerful. Oh, he's not. Oh, the Emperor's back now. Yay, he's really dead now. Oh, the good guys win, for real this time now.
And there was much rejoicing.
The Lucas-penned Star Wars films do a job of patiently earning the vision of the story. They're not perfect, but most everyone concedes that they're considerably better. As I've said before, the sequels' missteps were so numerous and frequent that the films themselves serve as the most complete compilation of their own suckiness. If you want to know how they fail, just watch them and start counting.
Don't try it!
Okay, Ben Ken, I won't. By the way, I've done it once already, quite pointedly, and that'll suffice. Instead, it's more helpful to coolly contrast the previous scenes of Succession with this scene of Succession. The handoff from Luke to Rey never really happens. While they try to make up for that later with certain forced moments, the results are less satisfying because of the structure of the films themselves. We get the feeling that the things that intended to qualify as challenges in training, when they do happen, are more like checkboxes or disclaimers. They're shown, but they feel hollow. they feel less real. The Last Jedi was someone's attempt to subvert expectations. What was subverted, powerfully and intentionally, was the original IP, but also the first sequel film, which was also not good, but a little better than this. Luke's death via the strain of a sort of astral plane force projection seems an obvious attempt to echo Kenobi's self-sacrifice and path. The problem's that, in The Last Jedi, it's too easy to believe that it's unnecessary. We're not convinced that this death was needed or that it even helped. And as substitute storytellers, we can imagine a million other strategies that might have been taken, none of which requires this kind of careless waste. It's dramatically stupid. By contrast, in A New Hope, the events we witness logically stack to force the fatal face-off between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader. Obi-Wan, Luke and company are trapped with no way out but to fight. Sure, it's basic, but it's also believable. And it advances the plot without any distracting doubts as to why what happened, happened. By virtue of circumstance, in Episode 4, Obi-Wan has no way out alive, which makes his death an acceptance of the inevitable, but a calculated, worthwhile sacrifice nonetheless.
You can't win, but there are alternatives to fighting.
While Obi-Wan selflessly gives in to the inevitable, Luke just gives up, selfishly and in an unfortunately cowardly way, which is profound because it demonstrates that someone in charge has a fundamental misunderstanding or disregard of what sacrifice even means. The Star Wars shortcomings are the result of both intention and incompetence, to different degrees and at different times. Sacrifice is not lofty when it's used to aggrandize a character or oneself. Righteous sacrifice is the recognition of the necessity of willful surrender to something higher, not a disregard for life itself. Sacrifice is not done for the sake of vanity, but for substantive good. And that difference, the one between values versus vanity, also happens to be the difference between Star Wars and its would-be successors.
We're not worthy! We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Watching the sequels is watching an undoing, followed by a write-off of legacy characters and a progression toward a series of incongruent story beats. Given the legacy of this series, whether or not this was intentional is important concerning matters of intrigue, but in terms of pure film, not as much. So we'll leave this at this. The sequels should have really been named a series of unfortunate MacGuffins, because what they seem to convey is an inferiority complex and a personal distaste for its origin. Okay. Of course, a writer or director can portray a character in an infinite number of ways. But even taking fan service off the table, did this particular approach to be novel make this story better? And is it sufficiently believable, given what the previous films told us about this character's defining character? I don't think it is believable. And I suspect most of you don't either.
Did you guess which thing is not like the other things? Did you guess with all your might? If you guessed that this thing is not like the other things, you know what? You know what? You're right.
Cookie gets it. And there's little more worth adding. I'll probably take a nice reprieve from covering Star Wars, because there are a lot of other interesting stories and subjects in the docket. Still, I hope this one was sufficiently fun/interesting. And as always, thanks for listening.